The biggest letdown at the 2025 Mr. Olympia was without a doubt Nick Walker. A good chunk of fans predicted him to win the show before it all went down, but after it was all said and done, Nick wasn't even good enough for top 5. Now there's a lot of speculation about why Nick placed this low. Was it the peak? Were there problems during his prep? Did the judges just not like his look? We've all speculated about this, but there are actually a lot of factors at play here. Some are in Nick's control, but I have to be honest, most of them are very fishy to say the least. This video will contain 3 parts so we can address these different issues. The first part of this video is simply a progress report. This is mainly what this video is about. How did this version at the Olympia compare to a previous version of Nick? Today we are going to compare him to his Pittsburgh Pro version from earlier this year. Many people had him beating Derek at that event, so we need to see what happened between then and now because obviously Nick lost a lot of ground placings wise. After that we're going to talk about Nick's transformation over the weekend from night 1 prejudging to Saturday night finals. And then we're going to discuss the IFBB's bullshit judging. And then finally, I think I can deliver you a pretty well-rounded answer to the question, what the f happened to Nick Walker? Anyway, with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into today's video. Remember, if you guys like these types of videos, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more. As I said, we're going to treat the first part of this video as a progress report video. So we're going to take a look at a few poses between the Olympia version and his best version from earlier this season from the Pittsburgh Pro. Now, I know this is an arbitrary thing to mention at the start, but I have to be honest, one of the main things I noticed between the two showings was the stage presence or lack thereof at the Olympia. At the prejudging, which is what we're judging here, I want to note that. We're just talking about the Olympia prejudging first, we'll get to finals. But anyway, Nick knew he was fucked at the prejudging, and that affected his confidence, which clearly affected his poses and transitions and maybe even the judges subconsciously. But hey, he had a good reason not to be too terribly confident. He didn't hit the peak at prejudging that well. With that being said though, I don't think there's the biggest difference between these two physiques. I will say that the lighting for the Olympia and the photos having their brightness cranked up by the photographer to counteract that do not help Nick at all. But with that in mind, what really is the difference here? On an actual physique level, not a whole lot. I think the waist is a bit thicker and the quads are less full than before. Now, on their own, these changes probably seem minor, but on Nick's physique, where he has almost 0 X-frame to spare, he can't afford to lose an inch off his quads and gain it in the waist. Then the already whack proportions look even more off. But I think the main transgression here is certainly the posing choice. I get why he was trying to do this. He was trying to do what he did at the 2023 Arnold. And honestly, had he peaked better and actually committed to the pose, it probably would have worked. But the waist would have needed to be on point. But go back and look at that pose though. He has pulled it off before. It's crazy to think that's even Nick Walker. Dare I say he actually looks somewhat aesthetic in this shot, but I think it's going to be a lot harder to pull it off nowadays, now that he's grown. Really, he just should have stuck with the crunched abs variation, and honestly, had he did that, you would see that the actual differences between the physiques are actually quite minimal. I know this seems like a big change, but really outside of a stupid posing change, I really only noticed that the peak is a little bit off. Again, the quads aren't as full and the stomach could be a bit more locked in. So literally a 5% better peak and not doing some stupid pose would have completely salvaged the first shot. When we go to a pose where the quads are out of the equation though, we can see that Nick actually did make improvements, and yes, he did bring a better side chest pose to the Olympia. The side leg is a bit bigger with pretty much the same condition, especially with that piss poor lighting to be considered with the Olympia version. He also has the fuller arm and delt now, and a better chest all around from fullness to detail. Now these differences are small, don't get me wrong, but any improvement from a top tier bodybuilder, especially a mass monster like Nick who's already pushing the envelope, is very impressive. And hey, the small differences still add up. In this pose, it's actually in a good way. This shot was in fact better at the Olympia. Nick's rear double bicep pose was the best in both of the shows we're comparing, yet somehow he was able to make improvements and make this shot even better at the Olympia. The upper back and limbs are pretty similar, but the lats are just getting more and more filled in. You can see his taper is not as exaggerated as in the Pittsburgh Pro version, but the upper back doesn't fall off so abruptly anymore when going to the lats. Clearly, he's added a ton of density and thickness in that mid to lower region of the back. Now the whole back looks like one giant slab of granite, honestly. It doesn't even look like muscle, but in a good way. He's dry, grainy, and very conditioned in both versions. And in the lower body, I think I honestly see a little bit more width to the thighs at the Olympia version, which again, just brings up the question of how. His quad width was already insane, but I think he marginally improved it at the Olympia, on top of improving his back by a few percent as well. Again, these may be minor improvements, but doing that to what was already the best rear double in the entire league is extraordinary. And like I said, he was able to maintain his dominance in this shot, and he really was untouchable from the rear across both poses. We don't even need to look at the other one, this one really speaks for both of them. Now, a pose I really wanted to look at was the abs and thighs. The only things I've criticized Nick on so far are the posing and the peak, which made his quads and waist a touch worse. Well, unfortunately, he didn't hit the abs and thighs that much, so we don't have a good photo to go off for the Olympia version, but we do have front relaxed poses for each version, which is the next best thing. I still included his abs and thighs for Pittsburgh just because. Now, really, this should be the most exposing shot for Nick, but I have pretty much the same thing to say. But I can say it more confidently because it's a little more clear in this shot. The actual muscle, especially up top, including the chest, delts, and arms, and even the abs are all intact from the Pittsburgh. He's just as good in all these areas. But we can see that the waist is definitely a little bit wider at the Olympia. To add insult to injury, his quads are down too, which again is a double whammy for Nick. The proportions are already not good, so he didn't really have any room to spare for a bigger waist and or less quads. Still though, I can't help but feel that this amount of change is indicative of placing basically first at the Pittsburgh and then falling all the way down to 6th. We'll break that down a bit more because it was a different lineup, of course, but right now it just doesn't sit right with me that this amount of difference made pretty much all the difference and pushed Nick out of the first call out entirely, especially when you consider some of the other guys that were in that first call out. And finally, let's end on one of Nick's best shots, that being the most muscular. It's pretty easy to see the difference here. Nick had more overall pop, fullness, and just life to his physique, for lack of a better term, with his Pittsburgh Pro version. Again though, that lighting at the Olympia is just atrocious, but with that in mind, let me ask you a question. If you gave the Olympia photo the same lighting and picture quality, would there really be enough difference in this shot or any of the other ones we looked at for an entire call out worth of difference? I really struggle to believe that. Yes, this pose is a bit better with the Pittsburgh Pro version, but make no mistake, Nick can and did beat just about everyone with this shot, even at the Olympia. This is still a really good pose, especially when you give everyone else the same god-awful lighting. Alright, so what can we conclude about Nick's Pittsburgh Pro version versus the Olympia prejudging version? I'm not trying to hide the fact that there was a change for the worst, so let me say it from the top. The Pittsburgh Pro version of Nick was better overall. But how much better? I mean, honestly, I don't think the Olympia version was that bad. Even at prejudging, the waist got a bit wider and the legs a bit smaller, and that most definitely hurt his overall shape to the front shots especially, except the most muscular really. But in all of the other shots, the majority of them mind you, he was actually better with his Olympia version. He had the best back poses in the show, his side poses were also a little improved, and his condition was still very good, and of course overall size has to account for something. This is open bodybuilding of course, and he was even bigger at the Olympia. So all in all, I think Nick is getting shit on a little too much for his prejudging package. I agree, it's not aesthetic, but he wasn't aesthetic in the first place. He's still bringing a Nick Walker physique, and with that comes poor shape but great condition, size, and knockout shots in the majority of the mandatories. But overall, I can't agree. He was off night 1, no doubt about it. He definitely deserved a lower placing than what we were all expecting on night 1, however, that does not tell the full story. Part 2. Prejudging versus finals. Okay, so we've established that Nick may not have been that bad at prejudging, but he was still not bringing his best. However, at night 2, he made a big change and it was for the better. Credit to the creator on this, I found these pics on Instagram and it did save me some work, so thank you, and guys, go give this account a follow. We don't really need to spend too much time on this though, because I think it's obvious. This is a comparison from prejudging to finals, and he clearly filled up and got his shit together mentally. At finals, he was hitting the poses how he was supposed to, and his body legitimately just looked better. Every pose was a little better than night 1, and some of them were already the best in the show. With that in mind, how does the Olympia Finals version compare to the Pittsburgh Pro? Well, not to worry, this same creator already made a post for that comparison as well. I still prefer the legs and the fullness to them at the Pittsburgh Pro, but I probably prefer every shot as a whole at the Olympia Finals. I actually like the front double pose more too, believe it or not. He's locking in on those abs, which really does something for me. We've already established that the side and back poses were marginally better even with the prejudging Olympia photo, and the same is true with his finals package. At a minimum, I think we can agree that this version, although slightly different, is still pretty much on par with the Pittsburgh Pro package, and overall this was a big improvement over night 1 at the O. So we should see a big shift on the scorecards, right? Right? So Nick actually lost a point at finals, believe it or not, which makes absolutely no sense, and not just on paper. Look who was in front of them and then put their finals versions together. Nick most definitely could have beaten Derek at finals. I will actually have a full video on this tomorrow because honestly, I don't even think it's close. I think Nick could have beaten this Olympia version of Samson on both nights, believe it or not, but definitely at finals. It's like the 2023 Arnold Classic all over again. I think he arguably could have beaten Andrew, but you'd have to be a big fan of the mass monster type of physique, but the argument is there on muscularity maturity, completeness, and condition. I don't think he would have been capable of beating Martin at finals. Martin is just the best of both worlds. He's muscular and complete and also brings good shape, so that's hard to beat for Nick. And then for Hottie, this is the only flat out no I'll give. I think Hottie, more so than Martin, is just the best of all the above. Maybe not the best of any one thing except condition, but he has the best combination. So yeah, I will say it's a no on that one. Nick wouldn't be able to beat Hottie with most versions, let alone at the Olympia finals. But overall, with all the people that were in front of him, Nick can at least compare quite well or actually beat one or two of the guys that ultimately did beat him. But again, that didn't happen. And no wonder. Nick was actually a victim of a much larger problem, so even though he got a lot better at finals and was capable of beating some of the guys in the call-out above him even, he didn't even get a chance to stand next to them. Part 3. Lazy ass judging. Nick was a victim of the IFBB's lazy judging, and while I don't think it was necessarily personal, I think this has affected, and will continue to affect a lot of shows and lineups. Nick just happened to be a victim of it at the 2025 Mr. Olympia. Now, what do I mean by lazy judging? Well, take a look at what happened at finals. Nick, Martin, even Andrew hardly got a chance to stand next to someone like Derek, even though they all got a little to a lot better, and Derek actually got a lot worse. And then take a look at the actual scores. A lot of the guys at finals, and this goes for the majority of shows, not just the Olympia, but a lot of the guys at finals have scores that are just straight scores. I hate to say it, but I think the judges just kind of phone it in at finals. It's more of a confirmation round in their eyes than actual judging. Hell, Tyler didn't even talk about finals in his recap video. Why not? It's a 2-day show and each day is worth 50%. What's more, in the classic division, they don't even get a score in the finals round, but the judges still act like it matters and it's 100% fair. Now, to be fair myself, I think some of us want to see the Olympia go back to a 1-day show with morning and night prejudging and finals. However, what we have right now is a 2-day show with each half of the judging worth 50% of the total scores. And as long as we have that, the judges need to judge the show properly. We run into major problems when the judges just phone it in and confirm what they saw at prejudging rather than actual judge what they see at finals. Look at the callouts this year at finals. Even prejudging, they were just lazy. The callouts at finals should not be picking up where they left off on night 1. That's ridiculous. We know that some guys may not change in 24 hours, but a lot of the guys are going to be different for better or worse, and that has to be accounted for. Nick got better at finals, Martin was holding his great peak from night 1, and Derek failed. And he brought the saddest package of the top 5. However, Nick nor Martin were rewarded for improving or holding their looks. They were in the second to last call out before the top call out and prejudging, so they stayed there for finals. The judges didn't even bother comparing them to anyone in the top call out. Derek, on the other hand, coasted in that first call out and was always kept in the middle because of how he looked on night 1. Hell, Andrew didn't even get put into the middle of the first call out until night 2, and it was only for 1 round. Why can't we have 2 guys compared at a time because they're close? Why can't the judges put one guy in another call out just to see how that looks? Why does men's open have to be so rushed? And don't give me the excuse that we have no time. Maybe we would have time if we didn't have 7 women's divisions with 60 girls in bikini alone. They're just lazy and or corrupt. Nick, Martin, even Brandon probably should have been compared to the first call out in some form. I don't think it's just laziness either. It's clear that they were trying to save Derek too because he was awful at the finals. But if they judged him properly and put him out of that top 3 that night, then he wouldn't have the points to secure his narrow victory, so they didn't even bother with the extra comparisons. Because if you keep putting a bad guy through comparison after comparison and give him a fair shake, it'll just become more and more clear that he didn't deserve the placing he got. And overall, judging like this hurts guys like Nick. He improved greatly at finals, but the judges just didn't care at all. He didn't even get the chance, and neither did a couple of other guys. Well, after going through all of that, we should have a decent answer to our question, what happened to Nick Walker? It comes as no surprise that my answer is multifaceted, but there are 2 groups that each of the factors fall into. Either these issues Nick had control over or he didn't. Really, the only thing I believe was 100% on him and his coach was his peak. Yes, night 1 was bad, but we saw it wasn't too terribly far behind his great Pittsburgh Pro version, but he did drop the ball. There is also the stomach issue as a smaller factor, but I believe this was an extension of the first issue. If you saw him and his demeanor on night 1, you would know that he probably should have been put on a watch list. He knew he had the hype going into the show, but then he also knew that he botched prejudging, and honestly, I just don't think he cared at that point. I'm not denying that he got sloppy with the transitions and his stomach. I mean, there's plenty of evidence out there that he did, but this was significantly improved night 2. So really, I just think he was so dejected that he didn't care night 1, and I don't blame him. I'd be very disappointed too. But the point is, night 2, he really cleaned up his act. However, this really is just one issue, a bad peak on night 1. That's it. Everything else falls into the camp of being out of Nick's control. I think all the factors in this camp have a similar motive behind them too, and it's this. To be blunt, the judges don't like Nick's physique. Period. End of story. It's clear that they haven't liked him for at least a couple of years now, or at least they don't like him enough to give him a shot at these major titles, much less the win, even when he deserves it. They'd rather reward a prettier physique than a better bodybuilder when it comes to Nick, even if he schools the guys on muscularity, completeness, condition, or all the above. Chances are they're still putting a more aesthetic guy above him just for the sake of being more aesthetic. I bring up this list all the time, but I'm going to do it again. This is a list of shows I think Nick was robbed at. At the 2022 Olympia, a really small Derek placed ahead of him. In 2023, he should have won that Arnold Classic. In 2025, he should have won that Pittsburgh Pro. And at this year's Olympia, he should have placed higher than 6th. Nick was not cutting at night 1, but he was damn good at night 2. But he ended up losing a point instead of moving up at all. Hell, he didn't even get compared, even though a guy like Derek can completely shit the bed night 2 and still end up winning the entire show. Or Samson can show up flat, stringy, and smooth on both nights and still maintain a 4th place. Nick is also more muscular and conditioned than someone like Andrew, and on the surface he compares pretty well to Hottie, but in real life the judges didn't even give him the time of day to compare him night 2. And that should be deeply troubling for anyone that thinks the IFBB isn't rigging shows. I don't even think they can use the cop-out answer of Nick's shape is bad. He still brings some of the best poses in the entire lineup, the best condition especially on night 2, and the most muscular physique. Outweighing those facts solely because Derek or Samson or whoever has a smaller waist is retarded. Worse than that, it's shady at the very least. Have the people in charge even flat out said that the IFBB is moving into the direction of shape first and muscle and condition second? And I'm not talking about just reading the tea leaves of who wins the top shows and maybe catching their hint of what they want. I mean, has the IFBB flat out said that shape is the most important thing now? To my knowledge, they haven't, especially not that explicitly. And if that is their new criteria, so be it, but if they don't say it outright, it makes it look shady as f. The truth is they will never define their judging criteria because the minute they do is the minute they have a concrete standard. And with a concrete standard, it becomes more and more obvious when they try to pull shady shit. So yeah, I don't even think the current criteria is shape above all else. Shape just seems to matter a whole lot when Derek needs the win or when they need to make sure Nick doesn't win. And this is kind of the whole point in regards to Nick. If he is not slamming the door unequivocally, he's cooked. And that's against totally inferior athletes as long as those athletes have a small waist. But really, is that even true? Nick has slammed the door before and they still gave him the shaft. The most recent example is this year's Pittsburgh Pro. All in all, it's clear Nick is done. And I don't mean he'll never win a show again or that he can't get to the Olympia, but actually winning these major shows is a completely different story. Even if he's at his best, he won't win. He still brings some of his best versions ever to the 2022 Olympia, 2023 Arnold, 2025 Pittsburgh, all of which he should have won but didn't. I wish this wasn't the case. I think Nick is a top 3 bodybuilder today, at least because he's so maxed out in condition and muscularity. But the judges aren't going to reward that or him. Now, I do want to make something clear. All of this is not to say that Nick isn't getting worse. I think his Pittsburgh and the Olympia finals versions were good versions, but not his best. Even he recently said that his best was at the 2021 Arnold, and I agree. And coincidentally, that was the last time he won a major show, but the lineup was not that deep at all. Even at the Olympia later that year, they shafted him for Hunter in 4th place. So look, overall, Nick should still be winning shows. Yes, his physique has gotten a little bit worse in the grand scheme of things, but that doesn't mean he's not capable of winning these events or placing higher. So what happened, or what is happening to Nick Walker? Why did he place so low at the Olympia? Well, to answer the latter question, he shouldn't have placed 6th. He should have been a little higher. He would have been 6th night 1, but on night 2, he arguably could have been top 3, at least top 4, which moves him up into the overall top 5 at least. And to answer our main question, what's happening to Nick is a political/business decision disguised as a judging one. Either he got caught in the crossfires at the Olympia of them trying to help Derek out, or they really just don't want him anywhere near close to the helm of the sport. He is getting worse. Let's not beat around the bush. But between him not even getting compared on night 2 and the judges giving him the shaft at every other major event, I'm all but convinced the judges have made their choices on Nick before he even steps on a stage. Well, that's going to do it for today's video. What do you guys think is happening to Nick? Is he deteriorating that much to slip in placings? Do you think the judges just don't like his physique? Do they not like him personally? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And if you guys like this video and want to see more just like it, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. And if you guys want to get your hands on some high quality supplements while supporting my channel even further, head over to Arms Race Nutrition. Then at checkout, be sure to use my code Project10 to get 10% off your entire order. That's code Project10 at armsracenutrition.com. And finally, with all that said, I want to thank you guys for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.